Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is our year to shine, coming to you again from my vacation. And I'm going to be talking today about Brene Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfection. We're getting now into the guideposts, and this is the second one today. I was hoping in the background you'd be able to see my beautiful view that I have out the windows, but it is a little foggy today, and then also I guess it's sort of shiny despite that, so it is what it is. So today's guidepost is Cultivating Self-Compassion. And when we were reading Christine Arlo's book, Madly in Love with Me, and we had those branches of self-love, we did have self-acceptance. And this is a little bit similar, but of course, like everything, Brene puts her own spin on it. And also I should read the little subtext, which is when you're cultivating self-compassion, what you're letting go of is perfectionism. We've talked a lot about perfectionism on this channel for sure, especially during our Simple Abundance year with Sarah Ban Breathnach last year. And I think I've thought that I had a grasp on what perfectionism is, but after reading this chapter again, since it's been a few years since I've revisited this book, I realize, again, Brene has her own take on it because she brings in her topic of shame research with perfectionism. And so now I'm definitely rethinking it, and I think you probably will too. So she's talking about how, just to introduce perfectionism, about how people will oftentimes own being a perfectionist, right? And they'll be like, yeah, I'm a perfectionist. But then, like when we were talking about shame, not everybody owns shame or even acknowledges it or even realizes that they have it. And one of her readers wrote on her blog post, or like a program she was doing, something about like, well, I can't relate to the shame, but if you ever do a program on perfectionism, count me in. And Brene was thinking like, wait a minute, perfectionism has shame at the root of it. Because why are we trying to be perfect? Isn't it because we have shame? Or like we're trying to be perfect so that nobody recognizes the things that we consider to be quote unquote wrong with us or unacceptable? So shame is absolutely there at the genesis of perfectionism. And the more that I was thinking about this topic, the more I was trying in my own life to sort of think about, like, where did I get this message of perfectionism? And you might think about that in your own life. I don't know that it's a specific one answer, because we have our whole society, and as we're growing up, we certainly get so many opinions on things, whether we're watching a movie or show or commercial or looking at a magazine or hearing things from our peers, which of course, like, they're bringing in their own ideas, or maybe it's a cultural thing in your own culture, or a religious thing that you learn, or your parents are perfectionists, I should say, and you realize that you get praised when you strive to achieve. And that's another thing. Brene talks about the difference between perfectionism and striving. So these are some of the things she says. Perfectionism is not the same as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is not about healthy achievement and growth. Perfectionism is the belief that if we live perfect, look perfect, and act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. So there it is. It's a shield. Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us, when in fact it's the thing that's really preventing us from taking flight. Yeah, and as a writer and presenter, speaker, teacher that she is, she does talk about how perfectionism can be a block for us in bringing our gifts and our thoughts and vulnerability and all that to the world. And we talked a lot about that last year as well, as far as when Sarah was talking to us in Simple Abundance about putting our gifts out there and having the courage to do that. That we really did have to let go of caring about what other people think, because that's also at the root of perfectionism. And again, that's so tied into shame too, because if we didn't care what people thought about us, wouldn't that eliminate shame entirely in our lives? I mean, we probably would still have the guilt and the trauma maybe of whatever brought on that shame. But if we were like, I don't care what people think, then it wouldn't be holding us back from anything. And I think if you have any sort of thoughts about being a perfectionist, I just encourage you to get on video on YouTube and just do a vlog like I'm doing, because you'll realize that perfectionism will kind of go out the window. I mean, you may watch yourself back like I do and maybe still have negative self-talk, but you have to just let it go. It's like there's so many times I watch a video and I might have said something wrong or pronounced a word wrong, or like there's this hair that like is way out to the side, and I've just had to be like, whatever. I don't care. I don't know. I've said that I'm an all or nothing person before, and I noticed that maybe I've given up perfection in some respects if it feels like things are just too far gone and there's too many things out of my control. Like, I think about when I told you guys that I owned a magazine for a while, and it was just inevitable that every couple months there'd be some mistake that so many people had not seen, and something went to press, and then I had to answer for it with a client or something, and their reactions were different. Sometimes people were angry and how could this happen and everything, and then there were other times. There was one time one client said something like, it's nice to know that we're all human, and I was just like, oh, I'm so sorry, but then I thought, it's just like my friend that said that one time, you're only human. So I think I was probably more of a perfectionist years ago. I'm still a perfectionist in a lot of ways, but when she talks about this striving to be your best, I would say I always strive to be my best, but I think I've probably given up a bit of perfectionism, and I'm certainly not afraid to admit that I've made mistakes or that I'm inadequate sometimes, like especially in a business situation where something like that, where you just have to say, I really wish that I could say I'm perfect and that my whole team is perfect, but obviously this slipped through the cracks and it's unacceptable and I apologize. And so I think I learned to let go of the reins a bit by being in some professional situations like I have been in. So more about perfectionism from Brene's standpoint. Perfectionism is also not self-improvement. Like, it doesn't help you to be a better person by being a perfectionist. Perfectionism is at its core about trying to earn approval and acceptance. Remember how I just said that maybe you got the message when you were growing up that it was praised when you were amazing and perfect? Most perfectionists were raised being praised for achievement and performance, grades, manners, rule following, people pleasing, appearance, and sports. Somewhere along the way, we adopt this dangerous and debilitating belief system, and this is what it is. I am what I accomplish and how well I accomplish it. Please, perform, perfect. Healthy striving is self-focused. How can I improve? Perfectionism is other-focused. What will they think? Right. Like, you're not doing it for yourself. There's another part where she talks about, this is the perfect example. Listen to this. This is Perfectionism Self-Talk. Like, it's somebody's feeling fat or whatever, feeling like, talking to themselves negatively through perfectionism. Ugh, nothing fits. I'm fat and ugly. I'm ashamed of how I look. I need to be different than I am right now to be worthy of love and belonging. Isn't that a shame statement? Yeah. As opposed to a healthy, striving self-talk sentence or a statement. I want this for me. I want to feel better and be healthier. The scale doesn't dictate if I'm loved and accepted. If I believe that I'm worthy of love and respect now, I will invite courage, compassion, and connection into my life. I want to figure this out for me, and I can do this. So yeah, the healthy, striving self-talk is about yourself. It's not about what other people think. But the perfectionism is from that. You could sense that fear, like, oh my God, what if I get fatter and fatter and fatter? That hits home with me. I have so much wrapped up with my body and in my shame and my perfectionism, I guess, if I look at it the way that Brene is saying it. So I feel like I still have a lot of perfectionism issues around my body and feeling like it's not good enough, I guess. So here are her definitions. She has a few statements about perfectionism. You know how she likes to get to the nitty-gritty of things. Perfectionism is self-destructive, and it's an addictive belief system that fuels its primary thought like this. If I look perfect, live perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid and minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. Perfectionism is also self-destructive because there is no such thing as perfect. What do you think about that? Perfectionism is an unattainable goal. Additionally, perfectionism is more about perception. We want to be perceived as perfect. Again, this is unattainable. There's no way to control perception, regardless of how much time and energy we spend trying. Isn't that true? Because you could be quote unquote perfect, and then somebody could look at you and still have judgment, or be looking at you through a lens of jealousy or something else where they would still find fault in it. Or they might even be like, that person's trying way too hard, you know? Perfectionism is addictive, like she had said before, because we invariably do experience shame, judgment, and blame. We often believe it's because we weren't perfect enough. So rather than questioning the faulty logic of perfectionism, we become even more entrenched in the quest to live, look, and do everything just right. That's true. Remember I was sharing in the shame talk about how I said, like, oh, if like somebody would just love me and just tell me that it's okay, all these things that I think are wrong with me, and that they would love me anyway. And then I said something like, you know, if it didn't work out, and then I caught myself saying something like, oh, then I would be like, I never should have said everything and been vulnerable. I mean, it's all about like that. That's a perfect example of how it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like somehow we have to get comfortable enough with our own shame and our letting go of this perfectionism that we think is going to shield us from the shame. Because if we're looking for another person to mirror this back to us, it's just like the perception part of it. It's just going to be a vicious cycle of never being enough. I mean, unless you find the perfect person that's just going to always mirror back, you know, love and acceptance and all this. But is there even a person out there like that? I mean, maybe it would be God, or maybe it would be a parent if you had the quote-unquote perfect parental situation. I don't know. Feeling, shame, judge, and blame, and the fear of these feelings are realities of the human experience. Yeah, she told us in that other chapter, too, that everybody has shame. Perfectionism actually increases the odds that we'll experience these painful emotions and often leads to self-blame. Things like, it's my fault, I'm feeling this way because I'm not good enough. You know, have you ever been in a situation, too, where you've on purpose decided that you're not going to try that hard because then if you fail, then you know that it wasn't your all that you gave? I don't know. Have you ever? I think that's a twisted sort of, I don't even know what category that would fall into, but it's similar to perfectionism in that you're purposefully letting go, but only because you are afraid. Because you're thinking, like, I'm not even going to bother because, like, if it's met with judgment or disappointment, then I can just say, like, well, that wasn't the best I could have done. I don't know, that I'm revealing all of my twisted ways here. I'm sure I'm not alone. So, and Brene is right there with us too. Oh boy. I really like the tone of how she's just there with us. She's just bearing it all. You know, she says, I've started to work on my own perfectionism, one messy piece at a time. And in doing so, that's how she finally became to understand the difference between perfectionism and healthy achieving. So she talks about a time too when some friends unexpectedly showed up, and her daughter was used to Brene sort of freaking out if somebody showed up and trying to like scramble and make the house look perfect and like changing everybody's clothes and stuff like that. And I guess at this point along her journey, she had just become like to the point of letting go of some of it. And so her daughter was just sort of surprised, like she sort of panicked, like, oh no, mom's gonna freak out. And she said, like, should I help clean up? And Brene said something like, no, I'm just gonna tidy up my hair and then let them in. I'm so glad they're here, you know. So she's just letting go. In that respect, she was letting go of caring what her friends really thought about her messy house, which, have you ever walked into your friend's house and really cared? I mean, it's always nice, I suppose, when you walk in and you're like, wow, it's so beautiful. But like, if you walked in and someone's house looked like disarray and lived in or whatever, you probably, oh, you might have different thoughts. I don't know. I suppose if it's your own perfectionism coming through, you might be like, wow, I would never have the courage to show everybody all my crap like this. But you might actually admire it, or you might think like, wow, I wish I could let go of my perfectionism where I could let people come in and see my messy house. I don't know. Again, it depends on how you were brought up, because some families don't even really have that sort of fear of people seeing a messy house or whatever. So everybody's experience is different. So into the meat of here, this guidepost is self-compassion. And she talks about Dr. Kristen Neff, N-E-F-F. And I remember when I was going through this book with the book club that I did a few years ago, that I went to Dr. Neff's website, and there's an assessment you can take on there to see how you're faring in some of these things, like what she's going to go into here now. So self-kindness is being warm and understanding towards ourselves when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate, rather than ignoring our pain or flagellating ourselves with self-criticism. I feel like you do that when you fail. Do you just sit there in it and just dump on yourself? I think I'm in all different, it depends on what it is, but I think I'm better than I used to be. Again, it's my body is mostly where I throw all of my hatred, but and maybe I blame my body for a lot of things that it's not even really related to, but I do know there are people that it's like if they say they came on and tried to do a video and then they wouldn't even be able to post it because they would watch it back and they would just be criticizing themselves way too much. Common humanity, Dr. Neff describes this as common humanity recognizes that suffering and feelings of personal inadequacy are just part of shared human experience, something we all go through rather than something that happens to you alone or me alone. And then mindfulness, probably heard that term, right? Being in the moment and being mindful of your feelings, and all. There's so much more we could say about it. Mindfulness is described by Dr. Neff as taking a balanced approach to negative emotions so that feelings are neither suppressed nor exaggerated. We cannot ignore our pain and feel compassion for it at the same time. Mindfulness requires that we not over-identify with thoughts and feelings so that we are caught up and swept away by negativity. So don't you think that some of these things, you need somebody, especially in early life, to sort of sit with you in these things. Remember how Brene talked about her daughter, feeling so badly about having to go home at the sleepover, and then her daughter was so lucky to have a mom that just came and like talked her through it and gave us perspective on it. Like, think about what you received as a kid, and your parents were just trying as hard as they could, and they're only able to bring to the table what they were given, and in most cases your parents were not given anything better. So we haven't really talked yet about self-nurturing so much, but we do sort of have to learn how to give ourselves what we didn't probably get from society or school or peers or parents or just our upbringing. How do we do that? I don't know. I'm not there yet. That's why I'm reading this book with you guys. And so, again, with mindfulness, I said there's so many things that you could think of and Brene says, many of us think that being mindful means not avoiding painful emotions. Then Dr. Neff's definition reminds us that mindfulness also means not over-identifying with or exaggerating our feelings. And Brene says, I think this is a key factor for those of us who struggle with perfectionism. Yeah. And, she's talking about life paralysis, too, a few times during this chapter. And you think, life paralysis, what is that? But it is when you're so afraid of not being perfect that you're paralyzed and you don't show who you are. We talked about being authentic. It's like you're too afraid to show your authenticity because it may not be perfect. Yeah. There's so much to this. Perfectionism never happens in a vacuum. It touches everyone around us. We pass it down to our children. We infect our workplace with impossible expectations, and it's suffocating for our friends and families. Thankfully, compassion often spreads quickly. When we're kind to ourselves, we create a reservoir of compassion that we can extend to others. Our children learn how to be self-compassionate by watching us, and the people around us feel free to be authentic and connected. That's true. And I'm thinking back to something from Simple Abundance too, and I skipped over it here in this chapter. I want to find it because it was really cool and it went along with The Shining. I may have to paraphrase because I'm not seeing it. Oh wait, it's because I haven't gotten to it yet. So remember from Simple Abundance when Sarah told us, I think it was the Amish, right, that whenever they make a quilt, they always have one little section of it that's on purpose, not perfect. And that was to remind them that only God can create perfectly. So I liked this as well. There's a line from Leonard Cohen's song Anthem that Brene quotes, and it says, "There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in." And that reminded me of our shine, year to shine. So many of us run around spackling all of the cracks, trying to make everything look just right. This line helps me remember the beauty of the cracks, and like she mentioned, like with the messy house, it reminds me that our imperfections are not inadequacies. They are reminders that we're all in this together, imperfectly, but together. Yeah. We haven't talked that much about how we're all, like, how she said perfectionism or being perfect doesn't even exist? Like I said about God, maybe God is perfect, or maybe you could find the perfect or perfect example of perfectionism. But we're all different. We're all different. And so the fact that we're even holding ourselves up to a standard, I mean, who's to say that who sets these levels of perfection? I guess it's just like a learned thing. And when I think about perfectionism, I think about the various parts of my life, and I think, and even with the compassion, I think, well, I can be compassionate to myself about making a mistake in the workplace or like in my business, like I mentioned, and letting go of the perfectionism. But then I mentioned like my body is such a hard thing for me, to accept and have compassion for. And again, there's a part of shame with that, because that statement where she was saying, like, if you're looking in the mirror and you're saying like, oh, nothing fits, I'm horrible, nobody's gonna love me this way or whatever, and then on the flip side it was like, I want to feel better, I want to be healthier, all that. I think for me it's like, I realize that I'm not doing anything about my body, to make it better. And I also actually don't believe there's a lot of things about it that I could change at this point in my life, unless I turn back the clock or had major liposuction or something like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I could go on and on with that topic. But how are you doing in terms of the perfectionism? Are you able to give yourself some self-compassion? And do you feel like I just shared, like, that there's certain, like, compartments of your life where it's like, yeah, I'm better, like, as a parent, I've just sort of, like, let go, and I know that I can't, like, create this perfect life, but I'm, like, just going with the flow. Or in my workplace, I strive, but I don't hold myself to this unrealistic expectation. Or in my relationship, I do the best I can, and I just realize that, it's not going to be roses all the time, but I do my best. And maybe in my family, I try to bring myself as authentically and vulnerably as I can, but I'm only human. I don't know, I wonder if you're having a similar experience to me. I hope that you can have an imperfectly perfect day. That's what I'm trying to do. Even with this fog, it's so beautiful here, and I just feel very, very alive being on vacation and just having this time to myself, and I'm seeing amazing things in nature that I've just been sort of like wrapped up in my quote-unquote city life, I guess. So it's wonderful, and I'm glad to be coming to you, even though these videos will be delayed a little bit, like I shared, since I don't have a way to upload right now where I am. But sending you guys love through the YouTube waves here, and I'll be back with you on the next guide post, which is Cultivating a Resilient Spirit. Yeah. All right, love to you all.